What would your life look like if your income suddenly became very limited? Not for a day, not just as a thought experiment, but for a full week. 7 days of living carefully, 7 days of counting every small expense, 7 days of asking yourself again and again, can I afford this? This is something many people don't think about deeply, because as long as money is enough, even just enough, life feels manageable. You buy food without thinking too much, you take a ride when you feel tired, you order something small to make your day easier, and it feels normal. But what happens when that normal disappears? This week, I decided to try something different. I tried to live on a low salary, not in theory, not just imagining it, but actually changing the way I lived, the way I spent, and the way I thought about money. I gave myself a strict limit, a small amount of money for 7 days, no extra support, no hidden savings, just that amount, and my daily needs. At first, it didn't feel too difficult. It even felt interesting, like a challenge. I told myself, it's only 7 days, I can handle it. But very quickly, something changed. The first thing I noticed was how often I had to think. Every decision became slower, more careful. Before buying anything, I paused, even for small things. A drink, a snack, a short ride. Things I used to decide in seconds, now took minutes. Because every choice had consequences. If I spent money now, I would have less later. And suddenly, time started to feel different too. I began to walk more instead of taking rides. I waited longer instead of choosing convenience. I planned my meals more carefully, not based on what I wanted, but based on what I could afford. And that's when I realized something important. Living on a low salary is not just about having less money. It's about having less freedom, less flexibility, less room for mistakes. Even a small unexpected cost could change everything. And that pressure, it stays with you all day, quietly, in the background. You might look calm from the outside, but inside, your mind is always calculating, always adjusting, always trying to stay within limits. By the second day, I started to feel it more clearly, not just in my wallet, but in my emotions. A simple decision like choosing what to eat became stressful because every option had a price, and every price mattered. I began to understand why people say money affects your mental state. Because when resources are limited, every choice carries weight. And over time, that weight becomes tiring, not physically, but mentally. So this was not just a financial experiment anymore. It was something deeper, a way to see life from a different perspective, a perspective that millions of people live in every single day. And I had only just started. By the third day, something inside me began to shift. At first, I thought this experience would only be about money, spending less, saving more, making better choices. But it was becoming something else, something heavier. I started to notice how often I felt restricted, not just in what I could buy, but in how I lived. For example, food. Before this, eating was simple. If I felt hungry, I would choose what I liked, something warm, something comforting, sometimes something quick and convenient. But now every meal became a calculation. I stood longer in front of food options, comparing prices, choosing the cheapest, not the one I wanted, the one I could afford. And even then, I had to think ahead. If I spend this much now, will I still have enough for tomorrow? So instead of enjoying food, I was thinking about survival. And that changed the feeling completely. Another thing I didn't expect was how it affected my energy. To save money, I walked more. I avoided rides. I reduced small comforts. At first, it felt okay, even healthy. But after a few days, I started to feel tired. Not just physically, but mentally. Because every action required effort, more time, more planning. Even simple things became less simple. And then there was something even more subtle, something I didn't notice immediately. I started saying no more often. No to small pleasures, no to convenience, no to things that could make my day easier. And at first, it felt like discipline, like I was being responsible. But over time, it began to feel like limitation, like my world was getting smaller, day by day, choice by choice. And then came a moment that stayed with me. I saw something I wanted to buy. It wasn't expensive, it wasn't unnecessary. It was just something small that could make me feel a little better. And I paused. I looked at the price, I calculated in my head, and then I walked away. Not because I didn't want it, but because I couldn't justify it. And in that moment, I understood something very clearly. When money is limited, you don't just lose options, you lose small moments of joy, the kind that most people don't think about, the kind that quietly make life feel lighter. By the fourth day, I also noticed how my mindset had changed. I was more cautious, more alert, more aware of every coin I spent. But at the same time, I felt a kind of constant pressure, a quiet tension that never fully disappeared. Even when I wasn't spending money, I was thinking about it, planning, worrying, adjusting, and that feeling stayed with me throughout the day. So this experience was no longer just about living on a low salary, it was about understanding what that life really feels like. Not from the outside, but from the inside. And I was beginning to see just how different it truly is. By the fifth day, something unexpected happened. I stopped thinking about what I wanted and started thinking only about what I needed, not in a dramatic way, not as a decision. It just happened. Quietly, naturally, almost without noticing. I no longer looked at food and asked, "What do I feel like eating?" Instead, I asked, "What is the cheapest option that can fill me?" I no longer thought about saving time. I thought about saving money, even if it meant spending more energy, more effort, more time. And that shift felt strange because it changed how I experienced my day. Before, small things could bring a bit of comfort: a drink you enjoy, a short break with something you like, a simple convenience that makes life easier. But now, those things felt distant, almost unnecessary. Not because they truly were, but because they didn't fit into the budget. And slowly, something else began to appear: a quiet sense of limitation. Not loud, not obvious, just a feeling that your world is a little smaller than before. You go to fewer places, you consider fewer options, you say no more often than yes. And over time, that affects how you feel, not just about money, but about life. There was also a moment when I realized how important stability is, because when you live with very little margin, anything unexpected becomes a problem. A small price increase, a sudden need, a minor inconvenience, things that normally don't matter, now requires serious thought, and that creates a kind of constant alertness. You are always preparing, always calculating, always trying to avoid mistakes because mistakes cost money, and money is limited. By the sixth day, I started to feel something deeper. Not just pressure, but fatigue. Not physical fatigue, but mental fatigue. The kind that comes from making too many careful decisions, all day, every day, without a break. Because even when you rest, your mind is still thinking, still planning, still worrying about what comes next. And that made me understand something I hadn't fully realized before. Living on a low salary is not just about having less, it's about carrying a constant mental load, a quiet responsibility that never really leaves you, even when everything seems fine on the outside, even when you are managing well. There is always that question in the background: will this be enough? And that question, it follows you everywhere, from morning to night, in every small decision you make. And by this point, I began to understand something clearly. This was not just a short experiment anymore. It was a glimpse into a completely different way of living, a way that many people don't choose, but live in every single day. By the seventh day, I noticed something I didn't expect. I had adapted, not completely, not comfortably, but enough to function. I knew what to avoid, I knew what I could afford, I knew how to plan my day around money. And in a way, that felt like progress. But at the same time, something didn't feel right, because this adaptation came with a cost. I was no longer exploring, no longer choosing freely, no longer living with ease. I was managing, carefully, quietly, constantly, and that difference became very clear to me. Before this week, I thought managing money meant being responsible, planning ahead, avoiding waste, making smart choices. But now I saw another side of it. When money is limited, managing becomes surviving. Every decision becomes necessary. Every expense becomes important. And there is very little space for anything extra. Even rest feels different, because rest is only peaceful when your mind is calm. But when you are always thinking about money, even quiet moments are not completely quiet. There was also something emotional that I began to understand more deeply. It's easy to say, just spend less, or just save more. But living it is very different, because it's not just about discipline. It's about trade-offs, real ones. Do you save money or save time? Do you choose comfort or choose affordability? Do you take a break or keep pushing to avoid spending? And when you face these questions every day, it slowly changes how you feel about your life. You become more cautious, more controlled, but also more restricted. And then I started to think about something important. What happens when this is not just for 7 days? What if this is your normal life, your routine, your long term reality, week after week, month after month, year after year? That's when the experience felt heavier, because I knew I could stop. I knew this was temporary. But for many people, there is no end of the experiment. This is simply how life is. And that realization stayed with me. More than any number, more than any budget, more than any calculation. It changed the way I look at money. And more importantly, it changed the way I look at people. Because now I understand that behind simple choices, there are often unseen limits, unspoken pressures, quiet struggles that are easy to miss. So by the end of these 7 days, I didn't just learn how to spend less, I learned how different life can feel when every choice matters. When the 7 days finally ended, the first thing I felt was not relief. It was awareness, a quiet, clear awareness of how different life can be, depending on how much space you have with money. Because that's what I realized this week was really about. Not just income, but space. The space to choose, the space to rest, the space to make small mistakes without fear. And when that space disappears, life doesn't just become cheaper, it becomes narrower, more controlled, more fragile. After this experience, I could go back to my normal life. I could spend without thinking too much again. I could choose comfort when I wanted. I could save time instead of always saving money. But something had changed inside me, because now I couldn't ignore what I had felt. The constant thinking, the quiet pressure, the mental fatigue of always calculating, and most importantly, the loss of small joys that make life feel human. A simple drink, a convenient ride, a moment of ease, things that seem small until they are no longer available. And this made me realize something important. When we look at someone living on a low income, we often only see the surface. We see what they buy, what they don't buy, how they spend, but we don't see what it feels like inside. The pressure, the trade-offs, the silent decisions happening every day. So maybe the lesson from this week is not just about money. Maybe it's about understanding that behind every small choice, there might be a bigger story, a story of limits, of effort, of trying to make things work with very little. And maybe if we understand that, we become a little more patient, a little more thoughtful, a little more aware of the lives around us, because money is not just about numbers. It's about how you live, how you feel, and how much freedom you truly have in your daily life. Thank you for being here and listening to this story. If this experience made you think in a new way, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And if you've ever felt something similar, share your story in the comments. 1. I'd really like to hear it, because sometimes the most powerful lessons come from simply listening to each other.